Coco Gauff says U.S. crowds, the worst, at supporting players overseas. Coco Gauff believes the United States is the worst country at having fans travel to watch tennis overseas ahead of the United Cup and Australian Open. The U.S. enter as the reigning champion of the tournament, but that success appears to have not resonate much with a home crowd as Gauff made the surprise confession that she believes U.S. fans are the worst. "I'll be honest, no," she said when asked if she felt the team would have a strong support in Sydney. "I feel like we're definitely, in the tennis department, the worst when it comes to that. So I've always said I wish our country and other places would show up throughout the world as we see maybe smaller countries support. But I also think it's just because of our country is good in so many sports, so it's just hard. Yeah, I definitely think there are Americans that come out more in Melbourne than necessarily here, but I would like to see some more Americans, if we make it to Sydney, than there were last year." Gauff was then asked if having few fans in attendance made them the underdogs, but disagreed with that assessment and pointed to them being the top-ranked team for the tournament. "No, because we're the number 1 seed, so there's no underdog in that standpoint," the 21-year-old said. "Yeah, we played Poland last year and the stadium was still pretty rowdy. I think maybe necessarily if they're not Americans, I do think we get a lot of support from people who are just fans of US that may not be from US. But, yeah, I would like to see a little bit more red, white, and blue in the stands in these team competitions." But despite the perceived lack of support in the stands, the US has consistently been a strong contender in this tournament, winning it 2 of the 3 editions so far. Taylor Fritz, who was alongside Gauff in the press conference, suggested the country was well suited for team events given the high average level of ability. "I think it plays to the strengths of our country," the highest-ranked American male said. "I think we have such amazing women's players. Coco's first year was just last year, and obviously we won it beforehand as well. The first year we had it with the top 2 men and top 2 women. I think that favors our country even more in that kind of format. You know, it's great to just feel like we have such a strong team all throughout. For me personally, I've always felt like I play a lot better in the team competitions." Coco Gauff, one of the brightest stars in modern tennis, is no stranger to cultivating attention, whether it's through her extraordinary athleticism, her candidness in interviews, or her presence as a role model for young fans around the world. Yet she recently made waves not for her racket, but for her words, bluntly suggesting that American tennis fans are the worst at supporting their players overseas. This sparked conversation in the tennis world and beyond, pointing to a deeper and more complex dynamic about national pride, travel culture, and fan psychology in global sport. Tennis 365+1. At first glance, Gauff's remark appears straightforward. She believes that, compared to smaller nations or other tennis-loving countries, fewer Americans show up in foreign venues to cheer on their compatriots. But that statement unravels into layers of meaning that reflect not just on American fans, but on the nature of global sport in a modern, crowded entertainment landscape. United States. What Coco Gauff actually said. Speaking ahead of the United Cup and the Australian Open, Gauff was asked whether she expected a strong American fan presence in Australia. Her answer was refreshingly frank: she doesn't. She stated that in terms of tennis fan follow-through across the globe, U.S. crowds lag behind others. In her words, "I'll be honest, no. We're definitely, in the tennis department, the worst when it comes to that." Biffison. She qualified her comment by noting that this isn't personal or ill-intentioned. Rather, it reflects a broader cultural pattern. Gauff acknowledged that the U.S. excels in so many sports, from football to basketball to baseball, that tennis doesn't always capture the same cultural imagination. When a nation has deep sporting diversity, it can dilute sustained interest in one particular sport, especially one that thrives on global travel and presence. Yet Gauff also expressed hope. She'd love to see more U.S. flags in red, white, and blue in venues like Sydney, especially if the American team makes a deep run. Biffison. Globe showing Europe, Africa why this matters. The power of fans. To appreciate why this sparkled into conversation, we need to understand the role fans play in sport. Fans aren't just decorations and stands, they are a living, vocal momentum booster. Crowds can lift athletes, make them feel invincible, or intimidate opponents. This is especially true in individual sports like tennis, where atmosphere and energy can genuinely influence momentum. In countries like Spain or Argentina, passionate supporters often travel internationally to watch their players. They pack arenas, rent buses, fly thousands of miles, and the players notice it. When Gauff contrasts that with quieter or sparser U.S. support abroad, she's pointing not just to numbers, but to the emotional energy that fans provide. There's a reason, for example, that when Spanish fans yell, "Vamos!" during Rafa Nadal's matches, it becomes a trademark of the sport, Those voices on foreign soil represent presence and passion. The question Gauff is really asking is, why don't we see more of that from the US? Thinking face what might be behind the difference. There are several reasons why US tennis fans might not follow their players abroad in the same way other nations' fans do. Airplane departure distance and cost. Traveling from the United States to Australia, Europe, or Asia is a long and expensive trip. For many fans, that's a significant financial and time commitment, higher than for fans in Europe traveling within the continent itself. American football sport saturation. In the US, tennis is just one of many sports competing for attention. There's football in the fall, basketball year-round, baseball in the summer, and a huge collegiate sports culture. Tennis enjoys popularity, but often as a niche compared to these giants. Thailand cultural travel habits. In some countries, international travel for sports is part of the culture. Fans make it a point to gather abroad. Whether it's football, soccer, in Europe or rugby in New Zealand, these fans are accustomed to flying for away support. American fans sometimes follow schedules but not in the same physical presence. Television local support at home. American crowds often show up in huge numbers at US tournaments like the US Open. It's one of the sport's most vibrant atmospheres, but the energy doesn't always carry over internationally. Compare that to smaller tennis nations that may have a few top players but many eager travelers who view each event as a chance to unite. Speaking head, a mirror for American tennis culture. Gauff's comment isn't just a whisper into the void, it's a reflection of how American sports culture interacts with global competition. The US loves champions, but fans may not always follow them beyond their borders, unless it's a major.